Halle, 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 ha. Palestine is a territory known for its constant conflict and its importance to all major Western religions. From its origins to the present day, Palestine has always been a center for violence and controversy. Settlement in Palestine is believed to date back to as early as 8000 BC to the village of Jericho in the West Bank. Because of its location in the crossroads of Asia, Africa, and Europe, Palestine has been conquered many times over by multiple empires such as the Egyptians, Assyrians, Romans, Macedonians, and the Turks. This history of violence has left an impact on the region that is still visible today.
In the 1940s, Israel went to war with Palestine. This led to a division of territory that we see today. The territories of Palestine are now known as the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. These two territories make up a total area of 2,324 square miles between the two. They border Israel, Jordan, and Egypt. Overall, it's an arid place with a hilly landscape in the West Bank. The West Bank contains a large portion of the Western Mountains and reaches a peak of 1,030 meters at Mount Nabi Yunus. The Gaza Strip is a much flatter landscape with no significant mountains or geographic abnormalities. The highest point in the Gaza Strip is only 105 meters at the Abu Awada. It has an arid climate with mild winters and dry hot summers that often involve droughts. Of the water available in the West Bank, Israel uses 73% of it. 10% of it goes to illegal refugees and settlers, so that leaves only 17% of the water for actual West Bank citizens. This has added to the animosity between Palestinians and Israelis. 15% of the West Bank's GDP is agricultural, and 90% of these farmers have to rely on rainwater because there isn't enough water left over for irrigation.
Palestine now has an estimated 3.53 billion barrels of oil. However, it is speculated that all of this money will go to Israel, and Palestinians will not see any of it. Jerusalem is the proclaimed capital of Palestine, but its administrative capital is Ramallah. The largest city on the West Bank is Hebron, and is located 30 kilometers south of Jerusalem. Gaza City is the largest city in the entire Palestinian territories, with a population of 515,556 people. Being the largest city in the Palestinian territories, Gaza also has the most trade and commerce, but is also faced with the problem of overpopulation. Another notable city, Hebron, is most known for containing the traditional burial sites of biblical matriarchs and patriarchs, and because of this is considered the second holiest city in Judaism, and is also considered one of the 4 holy cities of Islam. The West Bank and the Gaza Strip are under the jurisdiction of the Palestinian National Authority. This is a consequence of the 1993 Oslo Accords and the subsequent conflict between the Fatah and the Hamas parties. This government was formed with an agreement between the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the Israeli government. Palestinian Authority only has jurisdiction over security and civilian issues in Palestinian urban areas and over civilian control in rural areas. Israel still has control over all the rest of the areas. Currently, the president is Mahmoud Abbas, who was elected on January 9, 2005, winning 62% of the vote. He is still president today. Throughout his political career, Mahmoud Abbas has come into conflict with Palestinian militant groups like Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement because of his reserved policies, which are very different to these groups' hardline approach and their use of violence. Throughout his political career, he has called for the use of peaceful resistance to Israel and to the end of use of arms against Israel.
Ever since the Oslo Accord in 1993, the GDP dropped around 10% over the course of the following 5 years, and is still an issue to this day. Since then, many private industries have failed. However, the construction industry boomed due to the surge of immigration. Overall, the unemployment rates rose significantly, from 10% to 18% in just a few years. The overall debt has also increased as well. The only 2 remaining major industries are agriculture and construction. The GDP of Palestine is roughly $8 billion, and their GDP per capita is $2,900. The average poverty rate in Palestine is 29.8%. 17.8% in the West Bank, and 38.8% in Gaza Strip. The distribution of wealth is very much tilted towards the inhabitants of Israel. This has caused anger within the Palestinian territories and has only helped fuel the conflict.
Despite its overall poor population, education thrives in the Palestinian territories. With a 98.2 literacy rate, Palestine boasts a higher average than all but 2 nations in the Middle East. The educational system is broken up into three types of schools. 37% of the schools are boys only, 35% of the schools are girls only, and 29% of the schools are coeducational. There are 11 universities, 10 public and 1 private. There are 11 technical colleges and 19 community colleges. 17.9% of the government's total expenditures is towards education. Infant mortality is 13.49 deaths for 1,000 births, which is 117th in the world. Life expectancy at birth is 79.69 years, and the population growth is 1.99%.
As in other Arab cultures, men are the center of Palestinian life. The headman in the family makes almost all the decisions regarding living arrangements, children's marriages, and money. Work of most Palestinian poets are highly political and deal with the Israeli occupation and the plight of other Palestinians. Like other Arab countries, most artwork in the territory includes calligraphy and verses from the Quran. In larger tourist cities such as Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and Ramallah, artists sell woven rugs, tapestries, and other goods such as pottery and ceramic jars. After World War II, the United Nations made Israel a sovereign state. As a result, Palestine lost some of its land to this new nation and had many displaced people. Over the years since then, Israel has been in conflict with Palestine, trying to expand its borders and seize more territory from Palestine. With Palestine having had unfavorable governments and leaders in the past, such as the Hamas, Western nations like the U.S. have favored Israel over Palestine in these conflicts and continue to do so. Over 170,000 Jewish immigrants came to Israel after World War II, thus displacing many Palestinians.
In 1948, Israel created their Declaration of Independence. This resulted in the First Arab-Israeli War, which occurred from May 1948 to January 1949. The war resulted in Israel victory, with Israel annexing the previously proposed Jewish state into the borders of the Palestinian Arab state. After this, the Six-Day War occurred from June 5th to June 10th, 1957. After the Six-Day War, Israel expanded its territory to include the Gaza Strip from Egypt, the West Bank, and Jerusalem from Jordan. From 1987 to 1991, the first Palestinian Intifada uprising took place in the Gaza Strip and West Bank against the Israeli occupation. On September 13, 1993, the Oslo Accords were signed, which was a peace treaty between the current Palestinian territories and Israel. And between 2000 and 2005, there have been multiple Intifada, or uprisings, that have occurred.
It's good to have you with us here on RT today. A mass hunger strike by Palestinian prisoners over their detention without charge and treatment by Israel is increasing unrest all across the West Bank. Over 1,500 detainees have been refusing food for almost a month as their supporters clash with Israeli forces almost daily outside. Youth is at the forefront of the protests, being met with a brutal response from soldiers. RT's Paula Sleer reports.
The scenes are all too familiar. Children throwing stones, soldiers brandishing rifles. Major confusion.
Very often it's very difficult for the army to determine who throws stones, but a message has to be sent to the local population that won't be tolerated.
And the message is delivered brutally. These children were playing in a side street in East Jerusalem when undercover Israeli soldiers attacked them and forced them into their vehicle.
He caught me by the neck and started choking me. He dragged me to the car and threw me inside. I told them my eye was hurting me, but they said it's not their problem.
A report issued by Defence for Children International found that in most cases, children are arrested in the middle of the night. They were blindfolded, their hands are tied, and they're taken in a military vehicle to an interrogation centre. By the time a child arrives here at Ophir Prison, he will have been detained for up to 8 days. In the end, because of pressure, almost all plead guilty. But it's far from clear they really are.
They told me the best way to get out is to confess. They said they had 4 soldiers' testimonies, and each testimony is 1 month in prison. So I confessed. I eventually said I did it.
But the truth, says Ibrahim, is that he was at his grandparents' house for the festival of Eid. There'd been clashes between the army and Palestinian youths, and the soldiers had started going from house to house, rounding up youngsters.
They wanted to take anyone. They didn't care who. I told them I wasn't throwing stones, but they kept hitting me and saying, "We know it was you."
Aside from the arrests and illegal detentions, in the last decade, Israeli forces have killed almost 1,500 Palestinian children. But the IDF justifies its actions by saying many of them are used by adults as pawns. One incident that's been publicized a lot was when a 14-year-old Palestinian boy was caught at a checkpoint with a suicide belt attached to him. Since June 1967, more than 750,000 Palestinian men, women and children have been through the Israeli military courts, a statistic that underscores the perpetual Palestinian search for justice. Paula Sleer, RT, Katana Village.
This video shows how tense the relations between Israel and Palestine really are. With the military willing to arrest anybody who even looks suspicious, one can see that it is a dangerous place to live. Palestine has seen a number of conflicts ranging from religious expeditions to territorial conquests. In recent times and current day, it is a home to conflict and change. Though it struggles day to day with internal and external conflicts, the people of Palestine remain strong and true to their beliefs and country.